In southeastern Washington, families near the Hanford Site lived beside a secret that could not be seen, smelled, or easily proved. The Hanford Project made plutonium for nuclear weapons, yet many residents were not told that radioactive material was being released into the air and the Columbia River. The question is not only what escaped, it is why officials measured the danger while keeping the people nearby uninformed. The story begins with the Manhattan Project, the classified wartime effort that built the first atomic weapons. Hanford became one of its key places. Scientists and workers were sent to Washington to make plutonium, a material used in nuclear weapons. The work was hidden behind locked gates and strict rules. Even people living near the project often knew only that something important was happening. That silence had a clear shape. Information was divided among workers, scientists, federal officials, and local residents. A person might know one small part, while no one outside the inner circle could see the whole picture. National security was treated as the highest duty. Questions from the public had no easy path to an answer, because even a simple warning could reveal that a secret project existed. Near Richland, daily life continued under that wall of secrecy. Families worked, farmed, raised children, and trusted official voices to tell them when danger was close. But radioactive releases could travel far from the Hanford Site. Some communities downwind became known as downwinders, a term for people who lived under the path of those releases. They carried the risk without being given the facts. The records now show that radioactive material was released into the air and river during the war and the Cold War. That point is documented. The harder question is what each release did to each person. A family illness may have many causes. A single medical record rarely proves where the harm began. This gap between a public event and private proof became the deepest wound in the story. Inside the project, danger was not always unknown. Later released documents showed that some officials tracked the movement and possible risk of radioactive material in secret. That does not prove that every official understood the full health impact, or that every decision came from one shared plan. It does show that information existed inside the system, while nearby residents lacked the same chance to judge their own risk. The reason offered for silence was national security. Plutonium production was tied to weapons during a war, then to the Cold War struggle that followed. Officials feared that public knowledge could help an enemy understand the work at Hanford. In that setting, secrecy was not a mistake at the edge of the project. It was part of how the project operated. But a classified mission created an uneven bargain. Workers and officials could use reports, measurements, and technical records. Residents received little warning about what passed through the air or water near their homes. The people most exposed to the uncertainty had the least power to question it. Security protected the project's purpose. It did not protect families from doubt. For years, many downwinders had to live with questions that had no clean answer. Was an illness linked to Hanford? Was a child's health problem tied to a release? Was a family told enough to make a choice? Those questions were personal, but the needed evidence was held by institutions. The local story became a struggle over who had the right to know what had happened nearby. Then the wall began to crack. Released documents, later studies, and newspaper investigations brought hidden records into public view. The new evidence did not create every concern from nothing. It showed that the government and project officials had information about releases that residents had not received at the time. The dispute moved from whether anything had happened to how much harm had followed. That change mattered. A secret can survive while people doubt their own memory. It becomes harder to dismiss when records show that radioactive releases occurred and that officials tracked danger in private. The documents did not answer every medical question. They did something more basic. They gave communities grounds to say that their fears were not simply rumor. The Hanford Environmental Dose Reconstruction Project tried to study that missing past. Dose reconstruction means using old records, release reports, weather data, and other evidence to estimate how much radiation people may have encountered. It is not a time machine. It cannot measure the exact dose received by every person, but it can rebuild a picture from the traces left in official files. That limitation is central, not a footnote. A dose estimate for a group cannot prove the cause of one person's illness. A study may find patterns without naming a single cause in every case. Some health claims remain disputed because science must separate possible links from proven ones. For families, that careful language can feel painfully small beside years of fear. The fight was never only about numbers. It was also about consent. Informed consent means that people receive enough truth about a risk to make a real choice. Near Hanford, residents could not choose whether to remain near releases they were not told about. They could not ask questions with full facts in hand. Silence removed a choice before anyone could make it. Washington's landscape made the issue larger. The air crossed property lines. The river moved beyond the project fence. What happened inside a classified site could reach farms, homes, and communities that had no role in making weapons. The Hanford Project was federal, but its consequences were local. The state became the place where secret science met ordinary life. Richland and the surrounding region also carried a divided memory. Hanford brought work, purpose, and national importance. For some families, the project was tied to a job and a town's survival. For others, it became a source of fear and distrust. These views can exist together. A place can provide wages and still leave people feeling betrayed by the institution that shaped it. The later public record brought another reversal. Exposure was easier to document than injury. Officials could count releases and rebuild estimated doses, but no report could return the years when families lacked warning. No table could settle every dispute over a diagnosis. Evidence could confirm that secrecy existed while leaving the human meaning of that secrecy open to argument. That is why compensation and medical support took so long to become part of the public fight. Before help could be offered, officials had to face records they had kept from public view. Communities had to organize around evidence that was technical, incomplete, and often difficult to understand. The burden fell on people who were already living with illness, loss, or fear. The most careful conclusion is also the most troubling. The evidence does not prove that every illness near Hanford came from radiation. It does establish that radioactive releases occurred, that some officials tracked the danger in secret, and that many residents were not informed. Those facts are enough to explain the collapse of trust, even where medical proof remains uncertain. So why did Washington's Hanford Project keep residents uninformed? Because the Manhattan Project and the Cold War placed secrecy above public warning, and because the system treated nearby people as outside the circle of those allowed to know. Hanford changed Washington's land, its communities, and the meaning of trust in a nuclear age. The buried truth was not only what escaped the site, it was who was denied the chance to understand it.